Oh, baby, the regular season has come to a close, and that means the best time of the calendar year is upon us. It's Canadian box lacrosse playoff time, and things are about to jump up a notch or two. We get you kickstarted with a comprehensive playoff preview right here, right now on the Junior Beast podcast on CROW LAX TV.
And that's going to be stopped by Carpenter. Rebound comes out. Another one. He stops it.
Flirted the net. Twister 5-hole scores.
Couldn't quite find the shot, but he'll get the jumping leap and put it in. Wow. Bobbing and weaving inside. Quick shot. They score.
Isaac Nickel all by himself. This is what that scores. Isaac Nickel.
Look to get a goal here. Maybe Amundsen scores. Welcome back to the Junior Beast podcast. My name is Keenan, as always, joined by my co-host Muhammad, and joining us once again for this week's playoff preview is down from in Calgary, Simon. He's joining us. How are you guys doing today? Because, you know, as you said, Mo, we're in playoff time now. I'm super stoked. It's like a brand new season all over again.
I'm doing good. At this point, we're only a few days out of the playoffs. You can't really find a more exciting time other than the playoffs themselves for the regular season here. So I'm super happy. I'm super excited just for the first round to get started here.
Yeah, Keenan, it's about time the playoffs started. I feel like we've known these matchups for a good 2 or 3 weeks now, if not more. And so getting these playoffs kick-started right now and getting these guys out onto the floor and starting to figure out who's going to be representing Alberta in the Founders Cup, I think is nothing but a good thing.
For sure. And, you know, I'm super excited to get into it. We've got a lot to cover for the previews. But before we get into the playoff previews, I think we should quickly cover, you know, the final standings, how it all breaks down going into the playoffs, and, you know, maybe hand out one final regular season beast of the week.
Yeah, Keenan. So let's start with the North final standings. In first were the Rebels. They finished the year off with a couple of wins after having a late season loss to the Kings. They were comfortably in first all throughout the season. They are your 1 seed in the North. Meanwhile, the CROW finished second. They'll take on the Outlaws in a preview or a series preview that we're going to get to in a second. The Outlaws would finish as the 3 seed, and the Warriors would miss the playoffs in the 4 seed. That was how the North broke down. In the South, you had the Shamrocks really taking control of their division early on. They would finish as the 1 seed. The Mountaineers and the Marauders, once again, for at least the 3rd year in a row, will be matching up in the first round. The Marauders would take home the 2nd seed. They'll have home floor advantage in another series that we'll get to preview here on this podcast. The Mountaineers finishing 3rd, although finishing on a high note with a big win against the Shamrocks late in the season. They seem to be playing their best ball of the year. And then, of course, the Rockies dropping out at the start of the season, so that division really would see everybody making the playoffs. Then move over to the East. The SWAT would finish in the basement, 3rd. Only 3 teams in the East as well. And then we'll get to this series. Maybe we'll touch on it in this podcast, but we'll definitely touch on it more next week. The East final will be the 1st-seeded Queen City Kings taking on the 2nd-seeded Manitoba Blizzard. And then to wrap it up, we've got to talk about the Central, which was once again really the best division in the league. The Rampage would finish in the basement at 4th. They'll miss the playoffs for the 2nd consecutive year. And meanwhile, the 2nd and 3rd place teams will meet up in another series we'll get to here in a second. In second was the Silvertips, who surprised many this year by having a strong season, even though they lost their big-time scorer, Jared Norris, and also starting goaltender, Caden McDonough. They finished 2nd. They'll take on the 3-seeded Chill, who were a bit up and down, but are loaded with talent. And that should prove to be a really fascinating series that we'll get to here in a second. And first, in the Central were the Mountain View Mavericks, who take back-to-back division regular season. Actually, no, the Silvertips finished first last year, but the Mavericks did win the Central in the playoffs and then would go on and represent Alberta in the Founders. They are your 1 seed in the Central, and that wraps up the regular season. And I can't wait to talk playoffs with you guys here.
Yeah, that's a great look at what the standings are like, and I know that, as I mentioned, we do have a Beast of the Week, the final one for the regular season, and, I think it's a special one that we need to touch on for sure.
Yeah, Josh Vodchuk actually became the CROW leading all-time point getter this past week, as he gets to 299 points, just one shy of the milestone of 300. He passes Brock McIntyre for that title, or for that accolade, and he does become the CROW's leading all-time point getter. And congratulations to Josh. It's been a hell of a 5 years for him, and he will be your final Beast of the Week here as we wrap up the final week of the regular season.
Absolutely, and it's well-deserved. Congratulations to Fodchuk for, getting 299 career points. I mean, it sucks for him not hitting that 300, but I mean, it's nothing to snuff at. I mean, you play 5 years, you get 299 points. I mean, that is a crazy number just to think about and try to quantify.
Yeah, and I think for him, it's about winning now, like especially now. I think for every player, that should be the main goal. But if you look at it, 2 years ago, he goes from the CROW to the Rebels, and they bow out to the Warriors in the North Final, 2-1. Last year, he goes the other way. He goes from the CROW to the Warriors, and they bow out 2-0 against the Rebels. So this year, he stayed with the CROW. The CROW have been in a division that's sort of been open for them to have a shot at the Larry Bishop tournament this year. And, I think it's about time that he sees himself in that tournament. We'll see if he can get there and if the CROW can get there. But, I think he'll be the first to tell you that at this point, points don't mean anything. It's about winning.
Well, speaking of the Larry Bishop, the road to the Larry Bishop starts this week right here on CROW LAX TV. So let's get to the playoff previews. I know you've been waiting around for it so far. I don't know. Should we just quickly touch on the East? I know Simon's not going to be here next week to talk with us about the East Division since that series doesn't take place until next weekend. But, Simon, I'm curious your thoughts on the East Division. It's going to be the Regina Queen City Kings and the Winnipeg Blizzard meeting up again. What is this, Mo, now? 3 years in a row? 4 years in a row?
3 years, at least 3 years. And they've met every time in Regina. Regina's been the higher seed. And for anybody that's unfamiliar with how the East playoff works, because it's only a best of 3, they don't go back and forth. It's just whoever is the higher seed gets all 3 games in their building. And the Blizzard have had to travel the last 2 seasons to Regina, and they've taken both series in sweeps, 2-0. So that's just a little primer there for the Eastern Final. And like you said, we'll talk about it more next week. But I'm interested to hear what Simon has to say about that series as we get set for it next week.
Yeah, well, it should be a good one. Both teams are really good. I know that for sure. Even though the Blizzard are the lower seed at 11-8-1, not quite as impressive as the 16 wins that the Kings have. But it's hard to count out the Blizzard, especially after all the things that you just said. Right? It's the fact that they beat them the last 2 years in the exact same situation. It's going to be interesting. I mean, the Kings have had one heck of a year. I don't know. I don't know if there's a place you can watch this. I don't know if they're streaming it somewhere, but I'm really interested in tuning in for it because it should be good.
I believe, you should be able to tune into it. I think the Queen City Kings have a YouTube channel. There's no commentary or anything, but they do stream their games. At least they have for the last couple of seasons, so I don't know why it would change for the playoffs. If you type in Queen City Kings Lacrosse, you should be able to get a live stream for those games for anyone interested that wants to tune in.
Yeah, I'm looking now, and they have live streamed their games over the season, so I would assume that you can also catch them there. If you just Google or on YouTube, just search Queen City Kings. They should be one of the first ones that comes up. You'll see the Queen City Kings logo there right on YouTube. So, I'm curious, Mo, from a player's perspective, like from a former player's perspective, you're going into the series as the Kings. You know that you have home floor advantage now for the 3rd year in a row, and the monkey's on your back right now with the Blizz, sweeping you in 2 years in a row. Do you think that, I don't know, does that get in the head of the Kings going into the 3rd consecutive season in basically the exact same situation, or what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're lying to yourself if you're saying that it doesn't. I think athletes are humans, and sports are. I always tell people like sports are 90% mental, 10% physical, and those types of things are present in your mind. And if they're not, you're really not really thinking things through very well, and you might not be the brightest bulb on the tree. So that's a human characteristic that I think plays into it, but at the same time, they have had more success against them head to head this year. I believe they took the season series 3-1. They won the first couple of games against them early in the season, and they just split this past weekend. So I think they're probably in a better space mentally, knowing that they can beat them. But the Blizzard are an organization, and I've said this before, that understands what it takes to win, and they always put themselves in the best possible situations to be able to do so. And even though they had a lot of changeover from a season ago, winning the Larry Bishop last year, and then having a Founders appearance that probably didn't go the way they wanted after some travel issues and some guys not being able to make it in. So I think that they're a team that's always going to be difficult to beat. But, the Kings do have a lot of guys that can put the ball in the net. That's the hardest thing to do in any sport is to score. So they're going to have a real shot, and it'll be really interesting to see if they're able to overcome some of those demons, because mentally there's no question that the Blizzard would have an advantage in that aspect.
Well, I know we'll dive into it a little bit more next week on that. Thank you guys both for your insights into the East Division. As we'll wrap up the East Division talk until next week's podcast. Let's move back into Alberta. Let's go down south into Calgary, where the first round is going to see the Mounties and the Marauders take on each other in, a bit of a weird kind of scheduling thing where the Mounties are actually playing the first game at home, and then Okotoks Marauders are taking game 2 and 3 at home. So, how do you guys see the Mounties and the Marauders matching up? Because I have this idea in my mind, but I want to know your guys' thoughts.
Honestly, I have been
go ahead,
oh, sorry. I've been very impressed by the Mounties this year, every time that I've seen them. I do think that they're a bit better than their record kind of suggests. I haven't seen the Marauders as much, so I don't really know what to think about them matchup-wise, but I do, just because of how I think and feel about the Mounties going into it, I have them as the favorite. I don't know if you guys disagree with me on that one, if you guys have seen the Marauders a bit more than I have, but I don't know. It should be a good one. Both very, very close in the standings, obviously. So,
yeah, no, I think you're spot on with. I just think the Mountaineers right now are playing, I would say, the best caliber of lacrosse that they've played so far this year. They're peaking at the right time, and that's not to say the Marauders are playing poorly. I think they've been relatively consistent in the fact that they've sort of beaten the teams you would expect them to beat, and they've lost to the teams that you would expect them to lose to. But the last couple of years, the Mountaineers have gotten by the Marauders. They seem to know how to beat them in the playoffs. Actually, 2 years ago, the Marauders might have won. I know last year the Mountaineers won 2-0, but I think that the Mountaineers are a team that are able to win higher scoring games and lower scoring games. Like if you look at the last couple games with the Shamrocks, they played an ultra high scoring game with them, 16-13, a game that was tied late in the game. The Shamrocks came up with a couple of goals late to win that game, and then they beat them 7-5 about a week ago. So I think that they're comfortable in different types of games. I think that they've gotten better goaltending this year than they have in the past, at least the last couple of years since McDonald graduated. So I think that the Mountaineers are set up to win this series, but the Marauders also have a couple of higher-end offensive guys that I think will kind of pull them into the fight. Ben Erickson's had a great season, Dunbar as well. They have some threats of their own. I really wish that I had seen the Marauders more this year. I didn't see a whole lot of the Mountaineers either. Really none. So it is harder for me to give a concrete prediction. But I just think that the Mountaineers are a team that have so much confidence right now. And I think they want the Shamrocks. I think they believe they can beat them. They beat them twice. The Shamrocks lost 4 games this year, and 2 of them came to the Mountaineers. And if you recall on the opening, before I had seen any of these teams going into the season, I said that I just had a feeling that the Mountaineers might be able to knock off the Shamrocks, and we'll get to that later. I'm not so sure. I don't know if I'm going to predict that, but I think it's certainly a possibility, and I think they're going to have enough to beat the Marauders in round one. I'll say Mountaineers in two, but both games I think are going to be close. Like if you look at the scores this year between the two, Marauders 10-8 win, Mountaineers 10-7 win, and Marauders 10-8 win. So basically the same score all three times, roughly 10-8. So I would expect a lot of the same. I just think the Mountaineers are going to have a little bit more to offer, and they'll come out and win this series.
Yeah, from my perspective on this one, I do agree with you, Simon. I think the Mounties record isn't very indicative of the way that this team plays. You look at the Mounties' final scores of these games that they've lost, and these are final scores that, are games that easily could have swung the other way. I mean, if we go right from the top, you've got games where, the Mounties lose to the Marauders early in the year by a score of 10-8. There's another one where they lose to the Shamrocks 11-10. Another 11-10 loss against the CROW to 16-13 against the Shamrocks. So they're playing tight games. They're playing games where one lucky ball bounce changes the entire outcome of this game. I think the Mounties, sure, if you look at their last few games, what did they win? 2 of their last 5 games? Something like that. But the 3 games they lost were still tight contests. I think I agree with you, Mo, that the Mounties have a lot of confidence coming into this, even without their record reflecting as well as they've really been playing. On the other hand, I think the Marauders have been playing very well, and this is a Marauders team, and it's interesting actually if you look at the regular season between the Mounties and the Marauders. The Marauders won both their home games. The Mounties won both their home games. So it's just an interesting, the one home game, because I'm looking at the preseason as well, my apologies. The Marauders win both of their home games. The Mounties win their home game in that series. I don't know if that's going to be very reflective, though, as I mentioned, of how this series goes. I'm going to put my prediction at a 2-1 Mounties win. I think this goes the distance of 3 games, and I think every single one of those games isn't going to have a bigger goal differential than 3 in each game. You're going to see 10-7, 11-8, those type of games, if even. You might even see 11-10 or 10-9 kind of thing, right? So I'm saying Mounties in 3.
I completely agree. I think it's going to go to 3. I also have the Mounties, like I said before. And I don't know. You took the words right out of my mouth on that one. I would have said the same thing. I think it's going to be close in all of them. This is 2 teams that know each other very, very well. All of their matchups in the regular season were very close, as you mentioned. I don't know. It's going to be a really good series. The Marauders have 2 home games in this series compared to 1 for the Mounties. Maybe that comes into effect, considering the thing you pointed out there, both teams winning their home games. You never know. I don't think all of us taking the Mounties should be any sign that the Marauders can't win this, because it's going to be very, very close. But yeah, I completely agree. I'm going to put my money on the Mounties.
I think a lot of it comes down to the confidence factor, 100%.
Yeah, so here's the thing when you're predicting these best threes too, is that there's not a lot of wiggle room. Like every series is either going to end in 2 or 3. So it might sound like a slight on a team when you predict, 2-0, but really it's not. Somebody's going to win the first game, and then somebody's going to have a chance to finish it in the second game, right? So, and traditionally these series don't go all 3 games. They often just go 2. Whoever's able to grab the early momentum and sort of the early control of the series is often able to finish it off in the second game. And that's mainly why I say 2 games. It's not because I think the Marauders are largely inferior to the Mountaineers. I just think that the Mountaineers are going to have enough to win the first game at home. And then I think that they're going to be able to finish it off in the second game in another close game. I think that's how this plays out. But, it wouldn't shock me at all if it goes all 3 games. And I think you could say that for a lot of these series. So, yeah, I'll say Mountaineers in 2, but it should be very interesting, and I would encourage anyone who's in the area to go out and watch that series.
And one final note just on this is, I do say that the Mounties in 3. I give it to the Mounties in a series of 3. But if you were to give me these two teams in a best of 7, I say this series goes 6 or 7 games, and it goes the Marauders' way. But that's just me. That's how, in an ideal world where we have longer series. So.
Yeah, no, I mean, ideally it would be at least a best of 5, but it's you got to go with what we have given to us, and there's not a lot of space for, like I said, not a lot of variation in outcomes. It's either over in 2 or over in 3, and just based on history, I'll say it's over in 2.
Yeah.
So let's move on, guys, to the Central, and this is a series that Simon is going to cover along with Anand in the Calgary area. The Chill and the Silvertips. The Chill, the 3 seed. The Silvertips, the 2 seed. Your series schedule looks like this. On Friday night, the Pete Knight Memorial, 8 o'clock. The Chill at the Silvertips in Game 1. In Game 2, the Silvertips will travel to Brentwood in Calgary to take on the Chill. A matinee on a Sunday, or actually on a Saturday at 2 o'clock. And then for Game 3 on Monday night, if necessary, the Chill will go back to the Pete Knight Memorial in Crossfield to take on the Silvertips. The Silvertips would take the season series 3-1. They win games 8-4, 14-11, and 7-5. And then the Chill would grab one in a high-scoring contest, 17-11. And of note here, guys, is we talked about the mental advantage that the Blizzard have over the Kings. Well, the Silvertips have one over the Chill. They're 12-1-1 since pre-COVID against the Chill. And, maybe in the NHL, that's not a huge sample size where you're playing teams 5 times a year. And, there was no real COVID interruption and whatever. But like 12-1-1 in junior B lacrosse circles, and that extends over like 6 years, that is a pretty large sample size. And you think about the turnover on teams, right? Like you have 5 years of junior. That's a full 5 years, let's say, of a team dominating the other with the same players, essentially. So that's going to play a role, I think, in this series. Will it be enough to tip the scales in the Silvertips' favor? I don't know, because I do still think the Chill have more offensive talent. And I think they have more offensive talent than 95, maybe even 100% of the league. So, I mean, that's not a slight on the Silvertips. I think that this series, if the Silvertips are able to play the game in their image, which is a transition, get the ball quickly up the floor, amp up the pace on the Chill, that's going to play to their advantage. And then if the Chill kind of get the game into a 5-on-5 set, special teams type game, I think they have the advantage. So this is going to be a really interesting chess match. Whoever can kind of impose their will have the advantage. I do have worries about the Silvertip goaltending, especially down the stretch. I don't know if they're going to go with an AP or not. That might make a difference. I'm not too familiar with what they have in their system or who they might have available to call up. But if Matson's healthy for the Chill, that's going to give them an advantage in net, which is always huge in these playoff series. I went back and forth on this. I thought about a week ago I was going to take the Silvertips, guys, but I just have to take the Chill. I just think they have too many advantages, including in net, which is a big one. Silvertips used to have, you got to remember, right? Over this 12-1-1 stretch, McDonough was in the net for most of them, including even a couple this year. So at least one. So I'm going to take the Chill. I think they're going to win this in 3 games. I think that the Silvertips take one, but I do think the Chill are going to win this series. And I won't go too far or too much more into that, because I was almost going to give out another prediction in the Central, but I'll save that for later. But I'm going to say the Chill take another close series. And honestly, like, this would not shock me if it goes either way. And especially considering that the Silvertips history over the Chill. But I just have to take the Chill. My brain just tells me that they seem to, this is the thing for me with the Chill over the last 2 weeks. They seem to have figured some things out. They're giving up less. They're starting games on time. They're not getting down, which they've had issues in the past. They're not getting down in the first period and having to come back. They're taking charge. And I just think their skill is going to win in the end. So I'll take the Chill in 3. What do you guys think?
So I think in my perspective, this is also another series that's going to come down to confidence. I think the Chill are pumped full of confidence right now. If you look at their final 3 games of the regular season, they're 3-0 against the Mounties, the Rampage, and the Mavericks. Okay, I guess you can count out the Rampage there, but you're talking about 2 top caliber type teams in this league, in the Mounties and the Mavericks, and you have wins on them in the last 5 to 6 days of the season kind of thing. That brings you a boatload of confidence moving into this, even with, losses to the Shamrocks, the Silvertips, and the Rebels in the 3 before that. In, might I add, tight games too. The biggest differential was 5, and that was against the Shamrocks. Yes, the Silvertips do have the recency bias of, 12-1-1 over the last 6 years. And I get that. But I do agree, Mo, about, they had McDonough in net for all of those. It changes things quite a bit in my perspective for the Silvertips. I mean, the unfortunate part is that, I think the Silvertips have seen a bit of a... And Simon, you can correct me if I'm wrong afterwards, but I think the Silvertips have had a bit of a revolving door with goaltenders this year of, got a lot of goaltenders playing games.
That's not entirely true, but...
Okay, I might just be crazy then. I thought I saw a few different names over the course of the year. Maybe it's a lot less than I thought, so...
They have been APing lately. There's been some struggles, but I don't... Yeah, it's been mostly Orr. I know it's been mostly Orr.
Okay, maybe then I'm thinking somebody else.
I will just throw in there, the AP you are talking about is Caleb Jenkins, and he's been really good for us. He's been really good for the Silvertips this year. But he's mainly been coming in the late part of games that the Silvertips are already winning. That's where a lot of his games have come in. I think he might have started an away game at some point in there. I don't remember which one it was, but most of his minutes this season have been on the back end of games that Jacob Orr started and did well in, from what I've seen. But
okay,
yeah, I don't know. For the most part, I think Jacob Orr has definitely taken the reins for starter. And for the thing that you said, Mo, about whether you don't know whether it'll be an AP or Jacob Orr starting the series, I think 100% chance it'll be Orr. I think this entire year the Silvertips have definitely shown that's where their confidence is. Jenkins has been great. He's been terrific, but I think he's probably their guy for the future, not for this season.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I think game 1 you'll see Orr start, no question. I have some information that tells me that that they might be quick to go somewhere else if things don't start out the way they want them to. But that's to be seen. I don't know how accurate that information is, but that's what I was told.
So yeah, I think I see the Chill more so bringing in that confidence against, with kind of recent games. And, maybe kind of forgetting that 12-1-1. I mean, yeah, sure. I mean, we were talking not long ago about the Kings, having the monkey on their back against the Blizzard. And the Chill obviously have the same thing against the Tips. However, I think the Chill, like you said, Mo, have worked some things out recently. I think this series can go either way. Based on confidence alone, I'm saying Chill in 3. And I think, again, this is another series where you're going to see very tightly contested games all series long.
Yeah, no, I think that's reasonable. I don't see how one team kind of comes out and blows the other one out of the water. I think, like I was alluding to earlier, I think each team has some strengths over the other, some advantages over the other, and it'll be about which team kind of imposes their will and plays the style of lacrosse that they want to play quicker. The other thing I was going to say, too, is that guys, there's a lot of guys that, not a lot, but there's a handful of guys that can score. There's not a lot of guys that can feed the ball and distribute it at a high level. And the Chill have one of those guys in Cash Bannister. I really believe that he'll make a difference in this series. They've got guys around him that could score, like Dumoulin and Wallace and Shoecat. And, I could go on. But, I mean, I just think that if you watch the series closely, I think he'll ultimately be a big difference maker. And I think getting Mattson back in net for the Chill after his concussion, and then he had a groin issue, I think that's going to make a difference as well. So yeah, those are some of the reasons why I lean Chill. But like I said, a week ago, I was thinking I was going to pick the Silvertips. So I think it's just going to be tight.
I'm really happy that I went last year because I'm very much on the opposite side of the bus on this one. I do think the Chill are really good. I've been a big fan of their game the entire season long. I think they have one of the best offenses in lacrosse right now. But at the same time, I think that you guys are probably underselling the Silvertips offense. I think it's very, very good. It's nowhere near the Chill, and I will not attempt to make that argument, but it is very, very good. I think that when you factor in the transition game and you factor in the defense, which I think the Silvertips have the Chill beat on both categories there, I think that the Tips are going to be able to keep up with that offense of the Chill. And I don't know. The goaltending is an interesting conversation to me because obviously Matson's coming off injury. I've been super impressed by Orr for the most part. I think it's really interesting, the thing you were saying there, Mo, about the Tips potentially thinking about going another direction just because of what I've seen in the building and how they've used Jenkins. I just think that's a little odd based on his usage because you'd think if that was what they were planning going into this, they would have given him a few more games in the regular season or even just a home game, or even a tough matchup. Because from what I can remember, he just wasn't put in many situations where it was his job to clutch up. It was games that either they were already leading by 6 or 7 goals, or maybe they were playing a rampage that had already traded Dowswell. I don't remember if that was the game that he got in for, but that's a guess, right? Like, I don't know. In my opinion, I think it'll be close, but like you said, Mo, these series don't often go 3. It's whatever team grabs the momentum first. I have Tips in 2.
Nice, I like it. Some disagreement here. That's what makes pods like this worth listening to. No, I love it.
If we all agree on everything.
No, exactly. Like I like the different perspectives. I like the confidence too. Like you didn't just say Silvertips in 3. You're like Silvertips in 2. I respect it. So we'll see. Like I think this is a fascinating. I'm glad that at least 2 of the 3 games are going to be on CROW LAX because this is a series that I really do want to watch and see how it plays out. Because like I said, you got contrasting styles, and usually that sort of shapes up for, better lacrosse and better, more entertaining series. So I've been pretty high on both of these teams for the most of the season. And just last week when we did the power rankings, I had the Silvertips all the way up at 2, and I had dropped the Chill out. But there's just been a few things lately that I've kind of been observing and looking into, and I just have a feeling I just feel like the Chill figured something out here, and they've kind of underwhelmed with it. When you compare their talent level to their results, they've underwhelmed the Chill, and I think they'd tell you that. But I think 2025 is the year they get over the hump. But we'll see, because it's not going to be easy. The Silvertips are a team that plays with a lot of energy, a lot of belief, and I'm just fascinated to see how that series plays out.
And speaking of a lot of, belief and stuff like that and the confidence of teams, how about the North Division playoffs? Round 1, CROW and Outlaws. I'm going to be the first to say it, and I may catch a little bit of flack for this. I honestly saw CROW and Outlaws as round 1. I saw this forthcoming. Maybe not in week 1, but by like week 3 or 4, I saw that this was probably going to be where we ended up at the end of the year. I don't know if you guys agree with me, but that's just me.
No, yeah, it was pretty obvious, Keenan. Yeah. I don't think you're going out on a limb. I don't think you're going to upset anybody with that. I think that's a pretty common take.
Yeah, I think that it was, the losses to the Warriors and the Outlaws that were early in the season there in May that kind of, started to, push the nail in, hammer the nail in. I don't know what exactly you want to say, but I saw this coming. I think I don't know, I want to say what I didn't see coming was how tight that race was for second between the CROW and Outlaws. I think I expected the CROW to have a few more wins than they ended up with at 9-10-1. But yeah, I don't know. This is the way that I see this series playing out is different now that I know how the arenas work. So for anybody that hasn't seen the playoff schedule yet, there's an interesting scheduling thing here with round 1 for the North, where the CROW have home floor advantage. They play in their normal Jarome Iginla Arena on Thursday night, 8 p.m. Friday night at 8 p.m., they play in Beaumont at the Ken Nickel. If this series goes to 3 games, the CROW don't actually return to Jarome Iginla Arena. I believe it's because the city is putting ice in that building. So they're actually going to play in Service Place, the rec center in St. Albert at Performance Arena. And I don't know when the last time is that we saw 3 games take place in 3 separate buildings. That's just such a weird little tidbit about this series.
Yeah, Keenan, before we get into any analysis on this series, I just cannot believe that it took until Tuesday at 6:00 for the series schedule to come out. Like,
Don't even get me started there.
yeah, like you're trying to plan, you're trying to figure out what nights that you need to have space out or, to make available to call these games and just kind of just set up your schedule. And you're like trying to look and I found out from Vodchuk last night what the schedule is going to be. And I'm just thinking, like, we knew what this matchup was going to be like 6 weeks ago. And we knew who was going to start the series at home. Why is the series taking until 48 hours before it starts for the schedule to come out? Like, I just wanted to point that out and how frustrating that was. But anyways, I'll let before I talk about this series, because I usually refrain from making like flat out predictions on some of these North series because I'm too closely tied to it. I just know I've coached so many of these kids, or I've repped a bunch of them. I know them, trained some of them. Like, I don't know. Like, it's, for me, there's very little to get out of making a prediction, because if I'm spot on, nobody will say a thing. But if I make a wrong call, I'm going to hear about it nonstop. So I just try to refrain from making a prediction. I have one in mind, but before we get that though, before I get to that though, Simon, go ahead. I want to hear what you have to say about this North collision here.
Well, at this point in the year, I've seen both of these teams, and one of them definitely impressed me a lot. I think that they're a lot better than their record kind of shows, honestly, especially on the offensive side. And honestly, the other team, they looked about as good as their schedule, or excuse me, their standing shows. And to me, I think I don't know. I don't think it's a very close series, quite honestly. I think the CROW are maybe not very, but they're a good lacrosse team. And I think that they're going to show it in this series. I personally, I know you guys get to see that both of these teams a lot more than I do. I have the CROW sweeping it. I have them winning both. That's not necessarily saying that neither of them will be close, but I think that with guys like Vodchuk and the rest of that offense, Elliott's really good too for them. I don't know. I was very impressed by the CROW when they came to Crossfield earlier this year. So I don't know. I think they're going to take it. Who knows what could happen there? But yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, like you said, Mo and I have seen the CROW a lot more, and I mean, Mo and I mean, we've done games for a few years here, so we've seen kind of the players come in and out, and the way that the players play, and the way these teams are coached, and all that. So I don't know. This is where I'm in the middle. So I've been back and forth on my prediction a bit. I think if you ask me on any given day, it will always change. I think right now, and the way that things have been going, I think the CROW do end up winning this series in 2 games. They'll win this series before the weekend ends, or even begins, quite frankly. That being said, the Outlaws have shown through the year that they have what it takes to take it to some top teams as well. I mean, sure, the Outlaws don't have a great schedule. They did beat the CROW early in the year, but again, how much, weight can you put on early season games? But, I mean, the Outlaws, they go out to Winnipeg, they lose a game by 6, they lose a game by 5, and they tie one of the games. That is impressive for, the way that the Outlaws have played in recent years. Again, I think the Outlaws still have some demons that they're trying to figure out, and they have for a few years. And, we've seen a couple coaches come in and out of Beaumont so far. I think they're starting to work their way towards what that club wants to be. I just can't, in good conscience, say that the Outlaws are for sure going to win a game. I say that the Crew win this series in 2, but if something weird happens somewhere, the Outlaws might steal a game.
Man, Keenan, I'm kind of surprised here. You went a different direction than I thought you were going to go.
Really?
Yeah, just no, yeah. I'll say, yeah, I would say that. So this series there's some other factors at play here that maybe you might not, if you're just analyzing these teams on paper, you would probably overlook. Like the Crew, their bench staff, a bunch of them are not qualified. They don't have the credentials to be on the bench in the playoffs. Now, that's a big deal. Like coaching in lacrosse is a huge thing, and if it's just Terry on the bench and just defend for himself, I don't think that's a great situation. Whether or not Callan and company are able to be on the bench for the playoffs, because I know in the past if you don't have the credentials, you can't be on the bench come playoff time. So I think that's a factor. If you look at the last time these two teams played, well, first of all, let's go through the season series. So the Outlaws won game 1, 13-4, and that was by far the biggest spread in any game between the two teams this year. Then the Crew would take the second meeting, 13-10. And then the third game, the Crew take it 11-10. The Outlaws guys were winning 10-6 with 7 minutes to go. Like, that's a game you cannot lose. Granted, they lost it, but, like, that cannot happen. Like, that's a fluke. That's a pretty big fluke for that outcome to flip the other way. That just doesn't happen very often. And then the Crew, in their last meeting, the Outlaws had absolutely nobody playing. Their whole power play was out. Their best transition player in Gaudreau was out. Ellis was out. A lot of key guys. Now, the Crew weren't full strength either, but that game was 4-3, and they had most of their big guys playing, the Crew. That game was 4-3 halfway through. And then they take Couturier out, and things kind of slanted in the Crew's direction. They had a ton of APs with no experience at that level playing the Outlaws that were hurting them defensively. Like, I don't know, guys. Like, this isn't going to be like, I would be shocked if this is a runaway series here. Like, I think this is going to be close. I really do. The Crew have the two best pure offensive talents in the series, Elliott and Fodchuk. So that's something right there. Not having McLeod isn't great for the Outlaws, but Couturier, I thought, really improved over the course of the season. I thought in that last game, and they took him out halfway through because it was a nothing game. I thought he was making a lot of really good saves. I think if he can play like that, he's going to give them a really good chance. I think this is tight, guys. I really do. If both Porters are playing, I don't know if Grace is going to play yet. He's pretty banged up. Like, if you see him walk around, he looks like he's hobbled pretty badly. So if he plays, he's not going to be 100%. But man, like, you add Hildebrand back in, you add the Porters back in from that game, you add Ellis and Gaudreau in. Like, Wells wasn't playing. I mean, that's everybody, guys. And it was 4-3 halfway through the game. I don't know. There's a lot of loose ends to be tied up on the one side. And I think this is going to be another series where if the game is played, I think, on special teams, the Crew are going to have an advantage just because they have the talent edge. But if this series becomes like an up and down, like, series played in transition, it's anybody's game, guys. It really is. And I should say for the Crew, Bennett Fry's been playing a lot better lately. He adds another element to their game. He can score in transition. He's been playing the top of their power play. He gives them another look. But, when I talk about coaching, like, Ethan Forgrave and Graydon Cornfield are two guys I really respect. And I think that they're going to help. They're going to have some type of plan. And if Terry's left all by himself to come up with something, I know that he's told me himself it's not a situation he wants to be in. And I don't blame him. So hopefully for the Crew, they can have some guys on the bench. Whether that's the case or not, again, I don't know. But I wouldn't count on it, just given the fact that in the past, if you don't have credentials, you're not allowed on the bench in the playoffs. So I don't really have a prediction here. I just think this is a close series that can go either way. And I'm fascinated again, like all these three series. I think these are the best set of series that we've seen in probably at least 5 years.
I think
They're much.
this set of series across the league, it, like you said, is not only the best, but I think this is the one year where I don't think you can accurately predict what's going to happen anywhere across the league. Like, anything can happen in any of these series, and the way that these teams have been playing, I mean, like, how do you put an accurate prediction on any of these clubs? Like, honest to God.
Look at the power rankings too over the course of the season. Like the top 5 have all been pretty interchangeable. Like down the stretch, I think the Shamrocks in some ways pulled away from other teams, but like you could say the top 5 or 6 teams, there was always like a solid honorable mention, and you could put them as high as 3rd. And other weeks you were leaving them out entirely. There's not a lot of teams that have separated. The league is kind of watered down this year. Like the top of the league is not what it usually is. I'll say that. But I think it's going to make for some fascinating playoff series. And I think all of these series can play out in different ways. And that's why I'm so intrigued to see how it actually goes down. Because again, in the North, for example, you have a classic like talent edge one way, but then you've got some other like under the radar factors that are an edge the other way. So that's why I say I think if one series does end up go quickly, I think it is the North, because I could see it going a landslide one way and a landslide the other way. But I kind of said it was going to be tight too. So I really don't know what to tell you about that North series. I just think that has the widest. I'll put it this way: the North series has the widest range of outcomes than the other two do. I think the other two, you're going to see tight games. I think in the North, you could just as easily see 13-4 as you could see 7-6 in those games. So we'll see.
Fair enough. Well, that's all of the series actually that we've covered. Do you guys have any kind of closing thoughts heading into? I mean, I guess what technically is week 13, but week 1 of the playoffs.
Simon, what do you got here?
Well, not much. I was going to let you go first because I definitely needed to think about it. I think we kind of covered everything a little bit. I think that talk at the end about the North is very interesting, as, again, I don't get to see those teams quite as much as you guys get to. I think it's going to be interesting for sure, because it is 2 very, very different teams, just even in the way, like you mentioned, the way they play and all of that. So it should be interesting to watch, and I believe we have all of that on CROW LAX shows. So it should be good.
Yeah, the other thing I'll say, guys, is that when you're going and getting ready for a playoff series and a playoff run, and I know the powers that be with this team were not happy with this, when you got guys going to the Stampede right before the playoffs and missing games, that's not a good omen. I'll leave it at that. But those are the types of things that I worry about when we're talking about the North. But we'll see, because like I said, like props, like I'll give people props that deserve it. And like guys like Bennett Fry have really stepped up their game, and the Crew have the upper echelon talent advantage. They do, but will that be enough? A lot of times in the playoffs, it's not. So we'll see.
Well, I appreciate that, guys. So looking at your week 13 broadcast schedule here on CROW, it's going to be a set of, I believe it's 7 games that will be broadcasted. Potentially only 5, though, as, the weird fluctuations of the playoffs go. We'll start up north. We'll have all 3 games for you here on CROW. Game 1 will be Thursday night, 8 p.m. from Jerome McGinley Arena. Game 2, also an 8 p.m. start on Friday at Ken Nickel. And Monday, if needed, if we go to a 1-1 tie in that series, Monday, 8 p.m., the Outlaws will be visiting the Crew, not at Jerome McGinley Arena, but at Service Place Performance Arena, and we'll have that game for you on CROW as well. Looking down into the Central Division, we'll have 2 games for you, potentially only 1, as Game 1 takes place Friday, 8 p.m., the Chill and the Silvertips. And if things get tied up at the Brentwood, game number 3, if needed, will be Monday at 8 p.m. And finally, we'll have 2 Senior B matchups as the Beaumont Outlaws played one hell of a season. They're going to take on the visiting Calgary Mountaineers. Game 1 will be Saturday, a matinee matchup at 3 p.m., and Game 2 on Sunday at a 1 p.m. matinee matchup. Both those games from Ken Nickel and live right here on CROW LAX TV.
Keenan, I should also add, or I wanted to make another thing clear about that North series, is that just like I said, Bannister could be a real difference maker. I do think Liam Elliott for the Crude, if he's on the top of his game, he could just, he does have the ability to take over. He scored a couple of really nice goals the last time those two teams met. And, he's a guy that can have some wild swings in his game. But man, like when he's on, and so I'd watch for that. He does have the ability to take a series over.
Awesome. Well, guys, that's going to do it, I think, for this week's Junior Beast podcast. Simon, where can people find you?
They can find me just about everywhere at Simon SZY04 and in the background of a bunch of CROW LAX broadcasts.
Fair enough. And Mo, as always, where can they find you?
You can hit me up, MJ_9 on Twitter and M.Joma on Instagram. I want to thank everybody, as they have all season long, for tuning in. Get a lot of good feedback. And above all else, I want people to remember, I try to keep it real and, give people an inside look into things and sort of a genuine take on. I'm never trying to go after anyone. I'm not trying to call anyone out. I'm really trying to give people an inside look on some of the inner workings of how these teams operate and who's setting themselves up for success a lot of the time. And, a lot of these outcomes are driven by things that you don't often see on the floor. And a lot of the results that you might think are surprising really are not when you know some of these things going on. So I try to give people a little light, a little bit of information regarding that. And again, not trying to disrespect anybody. We got to give predictions on these podcasts. I think all these teams are deserving of being where they're at. And I'm looking forward to a great playoff series or a great playoff run.
Absolutely. And so am I. As always, be sure like, subscribe, comment, hit that notification bell, be notified every time we go live. All playoffs long in through the Larry Bishop Memorial Cup this year, coming at you from Fort Saskatchewan. Be sure, hit that like button and definitely hit it because, Mo, I know every time that you mention it, kind of, we get an influx of likes. Those help the algorithm so much and help bring all of our podcast, all our streams to a wider audience across Canada and grows the game in a way that you guys unbelievably have done. Over 2,000 subscribers strong this year, and we appreciate each and every one of you for tuning in every single week into every single game that you do. Well, so long for this week. My name is Keenan. Thank you so much for tuning into the Junior Beast, and we'll see you next week.